Let's take this example of a student class, and in this example, understand what is serialization and the deserialization in Java. So this student class has two fields, has a name and age, and also we are assigning one more variable here, which is the serial version UID, and we are setting that value to 1. We are going to talk about this part a bit later. So let's take a look. What is the serialization and deserialization, right? Serialization is basically a process of converting our objects into byte stream. So for example, in this case, what we do is we are converting objects into the byte stream, and we are writing that to the file, right? To the file under the name of the students. We are writing our byte stream. So that's the first one. What is the serialization is used for? Serialization is used for to save object state to a file, database, or send it over a network. It's achieved by usually using the object output stream or file output stream and the similar. What's the deserialization? Deserialization is the reverse process of the serialization. Let's say we have saved that byte stream into the file or database, and now we want to read those values, right, from file or database. The deserialization is the reverse process, the process of converting byte stream into the object. Again, we are using the same tools here: object output stream, or in this case, object input stream, and the file input stream. So there are several important points that we need to understand about the serialization. The first one is that the class, in this case, right, the students must implement the serializable interface. If you go to this interface, you can see that this interface doesn't have any method or any fields. So what is that for? That is called the marker interface, which has the no methods, that tells the JVM that the class can be serialized. If we are not marking, this is the point of this interface is just to tell the JVM that this class or this object in our case, right, it can be serialized. If we are not implementing that interface, then in that case, during the serialization, this exception is thrown, not serializable exception. The second one is the static fields. Static fields, as we know it, they are belong to the class, right? Not the object, not to the instance of that class. So static fields are not serialized, and the logic behind it is that very simple. The logic is that if they belong to the class, then in that case it doesn't make any sense to serialize them, because for the serialization we are taking the snapshot of that object at the moment. So for that case for the case of the static fields, we are not serializing them. And the next one is the transient keyword. So what's the transient keyword? The transient keyword is, let's say that in this case we are serializing this object, right? We are serializing, let's say we are serializing student, we are creating a student, and we are serializing them, and then what we do is we are deserializing them here, right? So what we do is we are deserializing the student here, and we are printing that value. So what happens is, if let's say that we have some fields here, let's say we have a password, or we have some other field that we don't want them to be serialized. It's a cache value, or let's say it's some value that shouldn't be, it's sensitive data, so we shouldn't serialize that data. So then in that case we mark that as a transient. So we are explicitly say to the JVM, hey, when you are serialize this object, object that is created from this class, we don't want that field to be serialized. So that's the next one. And besides that, we also have that serial version UUID, right? That the serial version UID that we have seen earlier. So in this case, we are just assigning the value 1 here. So what's the point of it? The point of it that whenever we are serializing an object, this field, right, the ID is assigned to that object. The ID is not assigned, but the ID is taken from the IDs. If we don't explicitly set the value for it, then in that case what will happen is that ID for that serialized object will be generated from the fields, methods, etc. for that object. But in case if we are changing the fields and if we are changing the methods, then that ID might change. And in that case, we may, when we try to deserialize that object, then in that case, we may, or it may throw invalid class exception, because in that case, we are the ID that the ID that is generated during the serialization. If we change, for example, this field, if we have new fields, then in that case, if we try to deserialize the same object, then the ID might be different. And when we try to deserialize, it may look for the object with the different serial version UID. That's the reason why we are setting that value. We are hard coding that, so we are setting that manually. So even if, let's say, we change here the method implementation, we change here the fields, then in that case, this serial UID won't be changed. So that is the point of it. So that's it. Let's run it and let's see that the serialization in action. So in this case, what we have, right? We have two classes. One is the serialize and writes the object into the student file, and the other one, the serialize, it does it reverse, right? It deserialize the object and prints the name and the age. So let's first serialize it. Let's first run it. Okay, object serialized successfully, and after that, let's go and deserialize it. We deserialize it, as you can see here is that we are reading from the file, and we are deserializing that, and we are taking that as a student object, and we are setting the value, we are printing the value, which is Alice and 22. As I said, if we don't want any field to be serialized, we can just mark it with the transient keyword, right? Let's do that here. Let's mark it with the transient keyword. In this case, we are setting the age as a transient, because let's say that let's say it's not age, let's say it's password, right? And it's a sensitive data. We don't want that to be written into the file or database or whatever. So in that case, what we do is we are setting that to transient, and let's run the serialization one more time. Again, object is serialized, and if we try to deserialize here the same object, as you can see here, this value, right, the value is set to null, because the value of the object, since we have set that mark that as a transient, this field, in this case, it's not this field specifically, the value of it is not serialized.